Hi, everybody. Thanks for your patience today. I know we're not all accustomed to doing Zoom presentations and meetings, but welcome to the Melbourne Art Fair Viewing Rooms digital program. I'm Genevieve Brannigan, the Director of Communications Collective, and I'll be on for the next hour or so. Communications Collective acknowledges the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of Australia and pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging. Today our discussions are going to be exploring the intersections of design, art, architecture, the importance of art and design commissions in public and private buildings, and the impact of COVID-19 on creative industries. A little bit of housekeeping. We will have Pascale joining us shortly. Roger, are you having trouble there with your video?
Well, it says it's on. I can stop and start it again.
Yeah. Oh, there you are.
Are you there?
Almost.
I think it's just a picture of him, isn't it?
Yeah, it was, but maybe this will be him.
Sorry, can they hear me? Hello?
I can hear you.
I can see you. Hi, Pascale.
Hi, Sally. How are you?
Hi. It doesn't say you're in, though. That's weird.
I can see I've got a postage stamp up in the right-hand corner of myself, but I can't see anybody else except for Roger.
I think the team at Melbourne Art Fair will get Roger and Pascale up on screen for everybody. And as long as we've got a bit of, I guess, sound for the moment, we can keep going and hopefully we can get these tech issues ironed out really soon. So going back to housekeeping, we've got about 45 minutes today for our conversation, and then we'll have 15 minutes for questions at the end. Throughout the sessions, we will have audience menu members on mute, but please feel free to send any questions through the comments section and we can look at those at the end. So today's panelists hardly need any introduction. I'll start with Pascale. Oh, here we go, another technical issue. There we go. Pascale Gomes McNabb is a leading Australian architect specialising in interior spaces. She's a true multidisciplinary designer that's created some of Australia's most renowned spaces, including Penfolds McGill Estate, Stoke House and Cumulus Inc. Okay. Roger Nelson is the founder and co-director.
I can see me and Roger. That's okay. Thank you.
Roger Nelson is the founder and co-director of one of Australia's best architecture firms, NH Architecture, known for their large-scale projects including Maya Melbourne and the Margaret Court Arena, and most recently Burwood Brickworks, which happens to be the world's most sustainable shopping centre. Roger, like all our panellists today, has an incredible affinity with contemporary Australian art. Roger, welcome in photo.
Thank you. Lovely. Video to some, yeah.
Sally Ross is a leading Australian artist renowned for her portraits and landscapes. For more than 2 decades, she's been working with architects and designers that are engaged with art. She's a self-confessed art monster and is deeply committed to relationships with artists, supporting exhibitions and arts organisations. Lucy Feagins is the founder and editor of the Design Files. Her digital design phenomenon has become Australia's most popular design blog. Lucy prolifically covers the breadth of Australian art, culture and design content, from emerging to the elite. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure. So I wanted to start today by inviting each one of our panellists to perhaps say a few words about what they've been up to during COVID-19 and perhaps how it's impacted their creative practice. Who'd like to start? Sally, what's the lockdown been like for you?
But being an artist, it's kind of isolating anyway. So it's actually been divine because all I've done is work. So it's just been no excuses, no going out, no gallivanting, no hobnobbing, just work. So, I mean, I've been very fortunate in that my livelihood, you know, in terms of the month to month wasn't particularly impacted by COVID. So I'm one of the lucky artists that's been able to just keep on working. You know, I haven't, I've had friends that haven't been able to go to their studio. or they've, you know, lost their job. So I feel very fortunate that I've been able to just keep on working.
Yeah. And Lucy, I noticed on the design files you did a series called Times Like These, where creative ISO tales. How's lockdown been for you, and what inspired the series?
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's been such a emotional roller coaster over time, I guess. And I guess for the first couple of weeks there, when things were very uncertain, it was, I think everyone was scrambling a bit to sort of understand what that meant for their business and for us, because we're such a sort of influential voice, like what stories we could be telling that would be useful and sort of somewhat respectful. And, you know, so we just started that little series, which has now come to an end. We did it for 10 weeks. I can't believe it's actually been 10 weeks since the start of all of this. But, you know, we were also talking to a lot of artists and creatives about the challenges they're facing. And unfortunately, a lot of the government funding hasn't really trickled through to artists. And, you know, the nature of making art and as a living doesn't lend itself to the sort of financial reporting that is required to get some of the funding. So we've definitely been aware of artists that have and creatives that have had a really difficult time. But for us here at Design Files, it's been about just sort of a holding pattern. We've been fine, but I'm looking forward to sort of actually planning ahead and doing some bigger picture things rather than being, you know, in maintenance mode, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. And Roger, do we still have you on the?
I'm here.
Okay.
I've managed to make my rear camera work, which would mean I'd have to turn my computer. I'll do. I don't know. Is that better? Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Hello.
Anyway,
So Roger,
well, apart from solving lots of IT issues like that one, we have moved our whole studio out in those middle weeks in March. So that's been quite preoccupying, and getting that stabilised, and that has taken a lot of time through mediums like this. But at a personal level, I suppose it's sort of been. I've got back to things I like doing once all that other stuff's dealt with, which is things like sitting down with a pen and drawing, and both for work and just mucking around, and that's been quite refreshing, because you can sort of do the structured interruptions. It's not the oh, thank God you're here, an episode of Thank God You're Here, which often my life's like, and especially when the lift door's open, and so I've been able to control that a bit and get back to having, you know, some thoughts of one's own. And then on top of it, we've built ourselves a house down in Lawn, and we've been spending a lot more time in that than we might otherwise have done. And my partner and wife Jane has invented quite a list of ambitious tasks, one of which was building a pizza oven,
yes,
which we managed to do.
This is here, I believe. So
Amazing.
Roger, living on a diet of pizza essentially throughout COVID-19 as a result, or?
Well, the production line really only swung in last weekend once we got the temperature right, because we were finding the bottom of it was very hot and the top was very cold. But on average, it was okay.
It looks good. That's all that matters.
That's right, and thank God we had enough black charred timber left over from Eco Timber, which means that you just end up with enormously very black hands for about 3 days while you try and scrub it off. But it's yeah, no, it was great, and it well, I think like any endeavour where you immerse yourself in something, even if it is cutting up bits of wood and getting it all wrong, it takes your mind off all those other things that are the sort of world of catastrophes that we read about every day or listen to or whatever. So it has been a curious mix of trying to find some sanctuary on the one hand, and on the other hand have to deal with a whole lot of things that we've never dealt with before.
Yeah.
I suppose COVID-19 has just been such a phenomenon for everybody. I think we might finish the conversation today with some predictions for the future post COVID-19, but I might move us now to a project I'd like to discuss with you, Roger, which is Burwood Brickworks, which is a very recently completed project, I believe. which has many, many interesting features, including being the world's most sustainable shopping centre. Can you tell us a little bit more about this project and in particular the artwork that is featured and the commissioning process around that?
Yes, so the project's been going for a reasonable time and started really as a modest neighbourhood shopping centre. And I'm sure that just saying that doesn't mean anyone gets excited. But it was, sometimes interesting things can be made out of the prosaic, and that's really what was done here. And our client, being Frasers, took on a really bold initiative, which was to put it through the test of the Living Building Challenge, the Living Futures Group, which means that it needs to start addressing things that are particularly relevant to the built forms these days of being more attentive to the way in which we consume energy and all those things. But one of the key things, of course, is that it's not just doesn't only work well, but it also has some inspiring and uplifting aspects to it. So a lot of sort of what I call normal design attributes were bred into it, such as access to light and air. And you can easily imagine that your average neighbourhood shopping centre probably doesn't do that. And that we did that. But in doing so, we were really hankering for something that could imbue the general space with a greater sense of it's where it sits in our physical world, but also a spiritual world. And it took some time, and it didn't happen at the beginning. It's sort of the inverse of what we would like to see, which is some of these things happened at the very early days. But we met through Ballaringi Group, Mandy Nicholson, a Wurundjeri woman artist, and amongst other things, and she had a particularly inspiring narrative about country and so on, and explained to all of us that were enthusiastic but not that well versed in it what all that meant and where the place found itself in greater than white settlement. And she eventually, we got her organised to be able to produce the artwork. So it wasn't just a sort of plonk bit. There was some mandatory requirement, as you can imagine, through town planning that meant you had to have a sort of 2 by 2 square metre bit of artwork plonked on the side of the building, which we were highly resistant to just doing that. We wanted it to be a much more immersive experience. So we managed to get Mandy to be commissioned for the whole ceiling. It's about 2,500 square metres, 7 to 9 inclined planes in a sawtooth roof, if you can imagine, about 7 or 8 metres in the air. So when one approaches it from one direction, you don't really see it because of the sawtooth, and when you approach it from the other direction, you get the whole thing. And there was 6 narratives to it that she describes, which I obviously won't go into now, but it's an incredibly powerful piece of work. It's monochrome as well, so it really works well with the building, and it's a really happy relationship. And that and the urban farm are the 2 major ticket items on that in that development, and all the rest of it sort of put back in its respective place. It provides entertainment and childcare and daily needs stuff, and it will soon be providing food and beverage and so on. But the artwork and the urban farm coupled together is a pretty good story.
Roger, how receptive was your client to such a large commission?
Well, I think initially, there's a lot of confusion about what one does when one integrates something like this. And the word integrates the issue really. Is it something that infuses the very thought pattern you apply to every design move that you're making? Or is it something you sort of acquire at the end and put it on like a tie or a sort of accessory? And it's the former that we believed in. So it was quite hard, because I think everyone approaches it with sort of their own ideas of how you do this. And of course, a project like that, there's so much invested in it. Everybody's an active participant, but sometimes people forget their roles, I suppose, and what they're best at. And so once we got that sorted out, the client really embraced it, and particular individuals. Stephen Choi was one who was instrumental in it happening, and Perry McDonald at the head of Fraser's Property Group was really behind it. And then once those people got their focus, it was easy for everyone else to follow and to then talk about how to make it happen. because it's at scale. You know, it needed to have some thought about how it was going to be applied and got into the space.
So how closely did you collaborate with the designer? Was it from, so with the artist, I should say, was it from the very beginning of the process when you kind of...
Yeah, well, myself and Stephen Choi met Mandy on site and talked about this. There was the initial bit, which was the bit that was needing to be done to satisfy town planning requirements. And I think everyone probably cringes a bit at that, but we met her, and I could just see in that moment that I said, hey, what do you think about this space, Mandy? And she goes, what do you mean? I pulled out a model of it that we had. It was being built, 50 metres away, but I had a cardboard model. I said, I'll just take this model and turn it upside down and look at that surface there. Do you think your narratives could be applied and worked into that space? What would you like to have a think about that? And she did, and it was remarkably simple. It was just, oh yeah, I'll give that a go, and off she went and came back with this amazing story, and really actively helped and curated through the Ballarengi group as well.
It's a wonderful story and definitely worth reading up on. If anyone that's watching today has the chance, I know I really enjoyed it. Roger, you've also worked on Myers flagship store here in Melbourne.
Yep.
Would you like to take us through, I suppose, your design inspiration for the facade of the building?
Yeah, well, Myer as a business is having its ups and downs, mostly downs, but the building is a legacy to this for the city. And when we got onto that, really what we were trying to do is to reconstruct. It was a collection of buildings. It was never built as one building, and had a facade put on by Sidney Myer in the 1920s, which is what we see on Burke Street. And we renovated that essentially, and with the mural hall at the top. And on the north side, it was effectively a new building, which was really for the half of the city block. And that enabled it to be have that massive atrium and ascending up to the light, 40-metre high atrium that took you up to the top of the skyline of the middle of the city, so that one could see out and engage with the rest of Melbourne. And we had sort of curated views, if you like, to the east and the west. There's a point at which you can see the GPO dome, for example. So you really know where you are. It's not a typical, what had been a typical retail environment where you get people in and you don't let them out and keep them unattached, if you like, to the outside world. So doing that was really important. But the motifs and forms that we used to bring the new construction and the renovated piece together really were derived from the typology of the Myer logo, which had been with it for quite some time, and its Art Deco traditions, and those that were present particularly in the motifs and forms in the mural hall. So that was used as a generator of geometry for the facade. I mean, obviously you've got to make all these things work with building materials that are relatively straightforward, but they are straightforward materials, but they're just organised in a way that's quite dynamic, and does take from the heritage of when that store was in its halcyon days.
Okay, and I suppose I wanted to also talk to you about, I suppose, one of our most famous Melbourne-born designers, Clement Meadmore. I suppose as a creative, you draw inspiration from many sources. What sort of influence has Clement Meadmore's work had on you as an architect, and I suppose on the importance of art and design in public spaces?
Well, I think I was always, the presence of those sculptures in our city's landscape is incredibly powerful, and yet some of them have found themselves, especially one around Southgate, very crammed in. And it occurs to me that they need more celebration. I mean, there's one we can talk about, which is being Vault, which has been moved around like a removalist truck around the city until its most recent home. But the Meadmore sculptures, I mean, to me, just have an amazing resonance. And I suppose growing up in the 60s and 70s in particular, that there was always a fondness for that, his thoughts and design approach, to the point we've got a maquette of one called Emanation here at home, which you just love being able to touch and look at and whatever and spin around. And I think that the other one that I was fascinated as to what actually happened to it. It was in St James Plaza, which is where the original AMP building is, opposite on the corner of Burke and William Street. And it's been taken away somewhere by the owner of the building, maybe to his private collection, but it disappeared. And yet it added so much to that intersection and place. So I think it's when things are happening at an urban scale, it's a pity that one has disappeared from us. And it's a pity the one at Southgate, maybe this will change now, is not put in a position where it can really be appreciated in 3 dimensions. And I think that's we live in a very 3-dimensional city, and what's made of the city is, you know, we're not Sydney with massive outlooks or headlands and water and sky and so on. It's an urban city, and imbuing it with that quality of design and peaking in pieces that really contribute to the sense of this city is really important. And Meadmore was part of that, or is part of that. So I think it's always reminded us in our work to be able to create the opportunity for those things to happen. And they're commission pieces as opposed to which the painting I was talking about on the ceiling was an ingrained element. And as with Maya, we took something from the design ethos of the Maya visual imagery into the buildings. So different philosophies, different ways of doing it, no one better than the other. Just what's better or worse about it is how well you do it, I suppose.
And I suppose his furniture pieces are just so highly collectible as well. What do you think about, why do you think they're still so relevant today?
Well, I suppose there's they come from a time of that post-war optimism and opening up of the world, and the sort of creative forces that really came into play in the mid-century period. And I think they just have a balance to them that seems to fit in nature, really, and has a proportional, you know, there's a proportion to most of his work that is easy to identify with and feels comfortable and engaging. So I suppose there's an enduringness to that work, and it's on the one hand it's its simplicity, and on the other hand it's its dynamism, that every angle and view can reveal something different. So it's engaged. It's not, you don't get it all at once. You know, you can immerse yourself in it, or in an instant you also can appreciate it.
It's interesting that you mentioned Meadmore, because he was actually trained as an industrial designer and an engineer rather than as a sculptor or artist. Yeah. And so it's funny that that's become such a sexy kind of strong modernist image for architecture, and that sort of, you know, they seem to work well with brutalist stuff. But it's sort of funny because he's like not an artist as such, but interesting to see how appealing something is, because he'll know how to fabricate it, he'll know how to do everything. So he's almost thinking in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's why it resonates with architects, because, you know, there's a great...
he's speaking your language.
Yeah, well, tension in our world where there's plenty of imagery out there of things that could be, and there's another thing to make them happen.
Yeah.
So Sally, you've been working with architects on commissions for, I think, more than a decade now. So you're very experienced in this area. I know you've worked with companies like Langham Hotel with Sotheby's Australia, Woodmarsh with RACV. You've recently created work for the Zimmerman USA boutiques. What's your experience been like working with architects? Do they like sharing the stage with artists? Or?
Well, I mean, I loved hearing Roger's story earlier about his work and collaboration with the Indigenous artists with that shopping centre, where he pretty much sort of showed her the site and said, oh, what do we do? What do you want to do? Because a lot of the time as a visual artist at the gallery, we have interior architects and designers rushing in and going, oh my God, the building's nearly finished. We haven't got any money left. We better get some art. And then so you're really thinking about where the art fits into a whole project at quite a late stage. And, you know, you've spent all your money on your bespoke cabinetry and glazing, and there's actually not that much money left to integrate art and culture into the project. And I mean, I say this often, just because a building is sculptural, it doesn't mean it's sculpture. So, and I guess we can enjoy all of those artistic things about architecture, but it's really exciting when you do have that real collaboration between architecture, interior architecture, design, making, as well as the kind of the possibilities that artists can really present, which go beyond logic and practicality, I think. I mean, like the picture that's up on stage at the moment, I love. It's Annie Peck, who was the first woman to climb the Matterhorn. And that is in a kind of really high traffic Notting Hill restaurant in London that Bill Granger did. So it's a really unlikely, you would never think, oh, gee, I really want to put a picture of a female mountain climber in the middle of my restaurant. But it's really fun the way that that works, because it's actually not that logical.
Yes, yeah.
But it kind of works. You know, sometimes you just have to measure up the wall and it becomes about proportion rather than anything else.
So, Sally, I know you love the Ghent Altar Commission. Could you
Who doesn't?
tell us why, in particular, this interests you so much?
Look, I talk about the Ghent Altar piece for a number of reasons when I speak with clients or with architects, because we always have restrictions when we talk about a commission and a project, and artists can sometimes get pissed off because, you know, they have to use a colour or something like that. And Van Eyck was told, you have to have this rich bastard. You've got to paint a really beautiful picture of him. There has to be a baby. There has to be a manger. There has to be, there was a lot of restrictions and specifications, but he still came up with something really extraordinary. The work was also created absolutely specifically for the site and the spot within the building where the three-dimensional sculptures that he painted reflected light coming in from certain windows. So it was a great site-specific skill in that painting, which is from, you know, the 15th century. And so it's a really beautiful example of an exquisite site-specific object with a lot of restrictive criteria around its production. So I think artists can solve these problems.
And Sally, I know you're quite sort of, I guess, vocal about artists being able to come up with the ideas rather than the commissions being didactic. Would you like to talk us through the next couple of slides?
Well, I guess Vale, Christo and Jean-Claude, extraordinary artists who had a great, I mean, John Cowdell's project was really extraordinary because it was artist-driven, and there is also that beautiful possibility of things that aren't permanent, that aren't built forever. And I think that Christo's a perfect example of an artist who truly understood architecture, space, context, and materiality and participation. So, I mean, he's a really wonderful artist. We can't always wrap up our buildings, but, you know, it is interesting to imagine buildings and public projects where we actually budget in a program of events and happenings as opposed to always having to commission something that's permanent. You know, it might be something flowers or something that doesn't last, but this is another really exciting project. Sir David Ajay is going to be doing this project with Daniel Boyd up in Sydney on the Circular Quay, which will be really, I don't know if anyone's had the pleasure of being in his buildings, but they will be rather extraordinary. There might be a bit of a cringe about the importation of a starchitect, but hopefully he'll be able to give us something wonderful.
And moving on.
Oh, well, I mean, I guess that must be almost the complete opposite to a sculpture like Clement Meadmore. This is Laura Provost, and she's a fantastic artist who was born in France. I think she works mainly in Belgium. She's going to be doing a project later in the year at ACCA, hopefully, if their programming hasn't been too disrupted by COVID. These bosoms were made out of fiberglass that you make buoys out of. So they float like almost like a flotation device. I kind of wish that we put them in the moat at the NGV just to kind of get things to be a little bit more femme in there. You know, I think there was that terrible Victor and Rolf image with a great artist with the woman with the baby, and she was like a supermodel. And I thought we need to, you know, have a different kind of image of female power for our NGV. And I thought these were quite exquisite.
Another image, I suppose.
Oh, another Caldor project. I mean, once again, where you've got artists leading the idea with that beautiful story about the Crystal Palace being destructed in the 19th century within the Botanic Gardens, where the Indigenous artifacts were stored. And so then he created those exquisite ceramic replicas of the shields, which took over, which was a really, you know, a beautiful triumph of space and material. Once again, the artists came up with these fantastic ideas.
And Lucy, I know that you get, oh, sorry, one more slide for Sally, Jamie North.
A dear friend of mine who died about 18 months ago, Virginia Wilson, was a wonderful art consultant based in Sydney that did some great projects with Deutsche Bank, Aldi, ING, and she was really clever at picking up young talent. She spotted Jamie North. That's an image from the Biennale from about 2016, but probably a couple of years before that. I used to have to go to a project he did on Queen's Road and check if the plants were growing properly or not. And, you know, I think we've got some really fantastic artists in Australia that are doing really interesting things that work really well with materials. And, you know, we have some, it's really exciting to see what artists can do to transform architecture, and it really adds another dimension to projects. So I guess it's really great when art is in architects and designers' brain, you know, when they're seeing it, when they're thinking about it. And I guess that's really got to come, you know, at the inception of projects, rather than, like I said, oh, we better go buy some art. We don't have much money, but we better get something.
Roger and Pascale, how do you, I suppose, think about art and find art when you're commissioning or designing projects? Is it something at the front of your mind, or something that it's quite dependent upon the client?
Absolutely. I think for me, I'm often inspired by an artwork. My projects sort of have a genesis from something that I've seen or thought that I've seen, a snippet or an abstract image, and I try and tie those things back into my design process. But trying to, ideally, I'd like to collaborate with artists from the beginning, because you can really create something quite spectacular. However, it doesn't always work out that way. And as Sally was saying, you know, it's like, quick, let's go buy a painting, and off you rush somewhere. But ideally, you can weave things into the design process. It's always a layering process. And where it comes or where it sits really depends on the nature of each project.
Yeah, I think for our part, a little bit like Pascale's saying, you sort of have to pick your mark a bit. And it really gets down to the values of the people want and apply to the project right at the beginning. If we can really get stuck into those things and articulating that, then it becomes so much more obvious that a collaboration of creative effort is going to give a much better result than just one person willfully deciding everything. And that can be the client as well, of course. But so it does bear on in one's thinking at the beginning. How successful it is really up to a thing I was talking about yesterday with Burwood about perseverance and persistence, and being an advocate to explain that this can only help, and that it's the values we are going to now see playing out now in our world after, you know, the last 6 months of acute bushfires on the one hand and COVID on the other, means that we are placing more value on our existence and how it is. It's not a mechanical exercise or a monetary one. It's actually about the quality of our lives and things that are more important than less important. And maybe the balance of the sort of the sine wave of those things will change. And that being the case, I can see a period where we're going to go into a valuing of things, because the old ways maybe just have been coming to an end at the end of a sort of, 15 years of high levels of, success in the business world in Australia in particular. But we've been confronted by some things. So, you know, making sure that we rebalance those values is going to be really important. And, you know, engaging with these things more at the beginning is a better thing to do.
And Lucy, have you noticed during COVID-19, I suppose everybody's been spending an extraordinary amount of time inside.
Yeah.
Have you found you've had a huge increase in traffic on the site and engagement with design and art across the board?
Yes, we have found a huge increase in traffic to our website, which I'd like to think is of our own doing, but I really think it is just a sign of the times. Everyone's at home. A lot of people have not been at work, and that's been, you know, screens are sort of this thing we all have a slightly ambivalent relationship with. We want to get off our screens, but, you know, also it's been an incredible tool for connection in the last 2 months at least. So yeah, we've seen a lot more web traffic, but also there does seem to be a renewed interest in the home, domestic spaces and things like that. You know, we have a number of clients and collaborators who are brands like Dulux and furniture and design brands that are all saying that they're seeing, you know, a lot of interest from the consumer side in, you know, I guess investing in their homes and investing in art and furniture and design, maybe over and above other things that would usually be prioritized. So that's sort of encouraging in some ways. I think it's just, as Roger said, it's been a time that people have been reassessing their priorities in general and what is important to them. And yeah, I guess it's, it remains to be seen how it plays out, but I think there are definitely some really encouraging takeaways that we can, you know, I hope will be, we'll have a good optimistic sort of end result. Yeah.
Do you feel that sort of heightened interest from consumers will potentially then flow into kind of brands and corporates as well in terms of their thinking around commissioning art and design pieces for their offices and other spaces?
I think so. I think it's a time when people are realizing that it's time to invest in the important things and in meaningful things and not throw away things. And I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that. It's not just about the current crisis. It's also, as Roger said, you know, with the bushfires, I think people really are starting to be just generally more discerning, I guess, in their decision making. Where are they spending their money? Who's the money going to? You know, and you know, buying art at its core or design supports artists and supports designers. So that's important, and it's I think something that I'm always interested in what consumers are becoming aware of and what the mainstream, the mass public are becoming aware of, because, you know, there's only so much investment that we can expect from big corporations and things and the government. And I think when the public starts to show an interest in things or a renewed interest in things, that's where, you know, that's really powerful. And I think, you know, if people are showing more interest in buying art, commissioning art, or just having conversations about art and design, I think that's a really great thing.
And do you think, Sally, that there's sort of a role that's kind of lacking perhaps as a conduit, more conduits between artists and architects to kind of close that gap a little bit and bring people together so they can collaborate better?
I don't know. I think that it's really hard to say what's going to facilitate that, because I think there's a lot of architects and interior designers that are already kind of have a natural kind of interest and engagement with art. So I guess it would just be really about making sure that people are aware of the kind of the good work that's being done. I mean, that's why something like Lucy's platform is so fantastic, that, you know, often you don't get to go to all the galleries to see what everybody's doing, and yet you have to work out, and that's what's been great about COVID. Which platforms do I need to keep an eye on to see what everybody's doing? I'm busy, I've got commitments, but I'd like to keep up. And so it's that idea of which platforms do we use to learn about what good projects are happening in our city, in our local area, as well as nationally. And I guess that's more important than ever in terms of how we educate ourselves and how we connect with each other, because we are increasingly in our little ISO world. Artists are often, you know, we're up our own asses, you know, and we don't always have that time to get our shit out there. So I guess it is interesting how we share. I found there was a real increase in people looking at Instagram. I thought that was dead, and it's really kind of picked up again. So I guess it's whatever platforms are working to keep connected and to keep not just self-promotion, but sharing our information and what we're doing. And I guess getting the tone of that right is really interesting. So we're not just showing off, we're actually going, look at this person, look what they're doing, you know. And I think that that's one of the great things about platforms like the Design Files. And it's also that intersection between the snobby little groups and then the big world of people who are often intimidated by some of the more pretentious aspects of architecture and design. And I think it's really exciting to open that up and share that.
And I think, Lucy, you've really probably played a key role in breaking down some of those barriers of the sort of perceived elitism of design and art with what you do, both through your publications, but also your talk series, open house events, and so on. Was that your intention when you started the Design Files, or is it something that's just sort of organically happened?
Yeah, I don't know if I was very strategic about setting those sort of goals out in the first instance. I mean, we've been around for 12 years, which feels like an incredibly long time to have an online business. I feel like an old lady of the internet sometimes because it's changed a lot over the course of that time. But yeah, I think that the end result, as Sally very kindly put, is I think you know, being an accessible platform, and we're really I really value that. I think there are definitely, obviously, media channels where it's entirely appropriate to talk in a different way about art and design with different vocab and that sort of thing. But for us, we believe that great design and art is for everyone. And even if you can't afford to buy something for your own wall, that it should be delivered, that the content we deliver should be delivered in a way that everyone can engage with and feel that it's for them in some way. So we try and, sorry, Roger, but we do try and reduce what is known as archi speak, for instance, when we're covering architecture, because we feel like there are certain channels that's right for, and ours is definitely a channel where we want the most people to engage with it. So we really want to talk about architecture in a way that makes sense for most people, and the same goes for design. And maybe we should jump onto this slide, because I love the image you've brought up now of Arthur Senya and Adam Goodrum's recent work. So this is a really interesting commission that is really right at the cusp of art and design and where those two things meet. So it was created and launched at Melbourne Design Week this year, but sort of cut short as Melbourne Design Week was. And so this is Adam Goodrum, who's a commercial, very successful furniture designer based in Sydney, and Arthur Senya, who is also based in Sydney, but moving to Melbourne soon. And he's a very incredible craftsperson who does straw marquetry, which is insanely meticulous, as you can see in that photo. And yeah, they worked together on this series of work, which was exhibited through Tolano Galleries and all sold. And I believe NGV also acquired one of the works and supported the show through their work with Melbourne Design Week. So it's just one of these interesting things that is happening now in the design and art world, where we're seeing the NGV and public institutions come in to support design as a sort of a key a part of, you know, the art world, and sort of bridging the gap there between art and design. And then the next slide you've got there is a commission through the Broached Commissions organisation, which is a really interesting one. So Broached Commissions launched, I think, in about 2011, which is a really long time ago. They're very forward thinking, I think, in terms of developing a platform for the commissioning of bespoke design that really does sometimes border into artwork. Really, they're one-off pieces, very, very meticulously crafted. And they started out with funding from the government, and now I'm pretty sure it's actually they've really shifted more into sales, private commissions, creative consultancy, and that it's a very sort of high-end boutique sort of offer, but I think it's really important in the mix. And again, they're very connected to the NGV, and I think the NGV has had a really big part to play in Melbourne with this sort of rise of design being exhibited in the art world, and sort of being commissioned and made, you know, with sort of art in a sort of art way, if that makes sense.
And Lucy, you sort of mentioned to me that the NGV have also really recognised interior design as an art form in itself through, you know, the advent of the RIG Prize and so on. And obviously your open house series, you know, attracted, I'm not sure how many people, but thousands.
Yeah, 7,000 people. Was it a couple of years ago now?
Which is kind of an all-encompassing experience, isn't it? With art, furniture, design, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very commercial experience. That's sort of it's too complicated to explain it in this short time frame. But yeah, that's sort of a very commercial thing, in that you can buy whatever you see in that space. So that's got its own sort of niche. But yeah, I think the RIG Design Prize is really interesting because RIG Design Prize has been around for a while, and historically it awarded one-off design pieces, like furniture items, and then the last one was really celebrating and spotlighting Australian interior designers and creating immersive spaces, which then were layered and incorporated a number of commissioned design pieces within each space. And it was just interesting to see interior design on that pedestal in the NGV being sort of celebrated in that way, and sort of giving that cultural credibility that it hasn't previously, I don't think, had. And I think it just shows that there's an appetite for it, you know, and people are interested. And I think the commercial art world definitely sort of, I think, needs to be open to new growth and new areas that people are interested in. And I think design does seem to be, you know, a real growth area.
Pascale, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, I absolutely agree. I think good design can enhance your well-being, and you can create amazing environments to experience. And I think what Lucy is doing is really trying to create communities, and within that, of course, interior design falls into. And everybody lives in a home, or hopefully most people do live in a home, and you can create anything sort of within it, but it's sort of being accessible, having access to good design or ideas. And yes, sorry, I have to ask me the question again.
No, got it. Sally, you look like you've got something to say.
No, I'm enjoying listening.
I think interior design is extremely important, and it's quite interesting. I have a Bachelor of Architecture, and my parents are both architects, and then very heavily art-based. And then I'm not registered, Roger, so I can't actually call myself an architect. But then I went into interior design. But so I have this really, my fundamentals are really about planning. And I think there's always a layering process in design, and you have to start with the basics and being functional and planning things, and then layering things on top, where then you do bring in other collaborators like artists and designers to enhance what you have. It's an absolutely interesting process, and you know, it can go from complete minimalism to complete over the top maximalism.
Pascale, I know you're having some technical issues with seeing the presentation currently, but I've just popped an image up of the Clement Meadmore Legend Espresso bar, which I suppose was really played a role in helping shape Melbourne as being a more cosmopolitan city in the lead up to 56 Olympics. And when I look at his work, it very much reminds me of your approach to, you know, bespoke commissions and so on. Do you sort of agree agree with that? And do you like his work?
Oh, I absolutely love his work. I think it's quite interesting that he went from being a designer to being an artist. It's very rare that artists go from artists to designers. However, many designers like to call themselves artists. I don't entirely agree with that.
Francis Bacon never wanted anyone to know that he was an interior designer before he became a tortured artist. He used to design rugs.
Oh, absolutely. And his furniture is quite fantastic. Yeah. Sort of, as Roger was saying, yeah, of that era.
Yeah.
But I liked his approach to in Espresso, and I think, what was the other one? Cafe Legend. He designed absolutely everything. And that's sort of going back to that old school architectural practice, say, of Le Corbusier, who would design everything. But then he'd also collaborate with, say, Pierre Jeanneret or Charlotte Perron, Alvo Aalto and Frank Lloyd Wright, where it was a holistic environment. It wasn't designing just the building. It was in designing the interior, the light fittings, the cutlery, the rugs, everything. And that's sort of it's very rare to have that commission these days. It does happen occasionally.
Well, we do find that people do like to segregate things. Well, I remember being asked once, are you an inside architect or an outside architect? I said, well, it depends on the time of the day, doesn't it really? On outside.
Yeah. But in architecture, you are taught to design holistically. That's not just one element. And how do you separate that, really? Because one really informs the other.
Yeah. So I think that conversation about where your training is and what's it enriched you with, you carry forward in your life, but it enables you to have conversations with other people that are creative as well, whether they've had formal training or not. So we do struggle with the idea that we get compartmentalised and get brought in like a sort of bit player every now and again to do your bit, when in fact the design process is really a whole thing.
Oh, completely. I think the architects and designers, it's a collaborative process. It's not one person creating something beautiful. It's so many people and there's so many hoops to jump through. I mean, in architecture, you've got engineers and builders and lighting designers and acoustic, and the list goes on. It's hugely collaborative.
Pascale, one of my favourite projects of yours is the McGill Estate, Penfolds Estate, McGill. Myself up. Can you tell us a little bit? I'll just pop up a picture about your process with this project and how we're involved, because it truly is a really incredible, immersive space where almost everything is bespoke.
Can you just tell me which image it is? Because I can't see it. Sorry. My
image of the entry foyer with the reception desk and the bronze kind of sculpture and the beautiful glass blown lighting and custom glass. Yeah.
This is a really exciting project. The chef at the time was a guy called Jock Zinfrillo, who's actually now gone to MasterChef fame, beginnings of, and he took over the McGill Estate, which is the Penfolds signature restaurant in Adelaide. And he really wanted, he's an international chef and worked with many greats overseas. And he really wanted this space to embody, I guess, a world sensibility, yet really be Penfolds' signature and there to be an Australianness. And everything in the space had to be designed and made here. So whatever I couldn't design, I collaborated on, which was an amazing process. So from the light fittings to the carpet, to the chairs, the tables, was this layering process of using many people and people that I've worked with before. And you bring ideas and other elements into play that really sort of can ignite a space, and it was a really amazing project and one that I absolutely loved, and it has garnered a lot of awards internationally and here as well. but it was meant to be about the experience, about having the ultimate Penfolds experience, which really is about their wine. And I guess they're the one of Australia's most famous wine exports, and around the world is known for incredible wine, and it was all about the wine. So the lighting that you will see, I did a collaboration with an artist called Emma Lashmar, and she's a glass artist, and I said I wanted these bubbles and molecular I guess spheres to represent the wine and liquidity. And so she came up with these beautiful colours, and she generally only worked in clear glass. I said, no, we need more colour. I think we did one red one, but it didn't look as good as the shaded ones. And then we actually worked through the whole process, and I was there when she was blowing a lot of the glass. And then we hung up the glass and positioned it around the room over a couple of days. It was a really immersive, beautiful experience that often design these days, people want things so quickly, but good design takes a long time. You really have to think through things in so many ways. And with this project, luckily I was able to.
There's also something really exciting about like spotting somebody who has talent and maybe asking or requesting something of them that they haven't done before, and then having that faith, and which is a real risk, and then seeing the beautiful results when you actually collaborate. And that's, I guess, what real collaboration is, where you're actually you're two-way learning, you're taking a risk, but and you're communicating together to make something better. And I think with these different disciplines, that's one of the most exciting things about the collaborative process in buildings between all the different disciplines.
Absolutely. I think artists have the ability to be more provocative, courageous, political, and it's an intellectual pursuit. Architecture as well, but I think there's so many constraints on it that you never really can go as far as you want to go, but artists can, I think. And I think also in this collaborative process that you can hopefully combine.
And maybe in that artistic sphere is that possibility to take the risks that you can't necessarily take in your planning, or you couldn't get the windows you wanted, you couldn't actually visualize, or the budget. Maybe that's where the artist can come in, and you can have that leap of possibility through imagining and collaboration to get.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it is that frisson, isn't it? That frisson of ideas and, I don't know, excitement of creating something together.
And I mean, we go back to the beautiful image of Christo and that idea of folly, of something that's, and that folly is so beautiful, and it's so lovely to experience that within a space of something that's completely impractical and extravagant and wonderful. And I think that element in our lives is really, you shouldn't buy a bunch of flowers when you don't have a lot of money, but God, it's beautiful.
Feels good.
It's like, so it's that idea of where the pleasure and our desires come from in our projects as well.
Absolutely. I mean, Christo was so amazing. I mean, his idea and his artwork was really based on impermanence, yet artists and architecture are all about permanence.
Yes.
So, I guess artists really have that freedom to push beyond boundaries and go elsewhere. Yeah. And they don't have to be functional. Design really has to have a function to it. Good design. Yeah, definitely.
I suppose before we open up to questions from online audience, I wanted to ask you guys what your predictions will be for the world post-COVID-19, and also what people can do to help support creative industries.
I think more handcrafted, locally sourced, let's go Australian-made products, definitely. I think things with integrity, things that are long-lasting. And then giving back, I think just be open to possibilities and opportunities, and helpfully ask, if people ask you for help, please try and give it.
Yeah, I think the world, we unfortunately have been subjected, I think, to a lot of people making editorial and opinion in an attempt to gain a position in the commentary, and the social media probably that gives a lot of platforms for people to do that. So, but when you sift through it all, there's a sort of a hankering for things that could be dispensed with on the one hand, and a lot more value placed on things of permanence and that are enduring and are of a place. You know, the sort of commodification of our world is something that plays out in all our work, I should imagine, and getting back to something that has true meaning, and it doesn't have to be like an esoteric meaning, it just has to have meaning to the person, and it's not something that there's something they love or they appreciate about the art piece or the architecture or the journey or the sound or the smell or whatever it is that they're enjoying. So I think that sort of a more focus on that's going to come into play. I think people are going to become much more discriminating about all that stuff, and I think they're going to vote with their feet a lot more. And I think that's definitely praised on the minds of people who are in sort of commercial investors and clients and so on, because the world is not going to be 100% like it was. There will be different priorities, and whilst they won't be, I don't believe personally they'll be as dramatic as some of the editorial makes out. I think nevertheless people will be making far more discerning choices, and that may be about supporting something that's made locally that they can engage with, you know, by someone who's really doing a great thing. I don't know if anyone knows the Manapan story, Mark White's company starting the Manapan Furniture Group, with, you know, absolutely one-off pieces produced by Indigenous carpenters and cabinet makers up in near Groot Island. Amazing stuff, but you can only get it here. I mean, you can only get it, it's not something you can buy on the internet. You have to go to see Mark and get it commissioned, and it's made. So I think a lot more of that's going to be present, and cause us to all think about how things come into existence with a little bit more provenance and a bit more meaning.
Lucy?
I totally agree. I can't say it better than Roger. Yeah, I think it is just that I guess what we've all been afforded is the opportunity to slow down a little. And I think that extracting ourselves from that crazy pace that I think has been building up over the last, I don't know, forever, has maybe enables us to be more discerning, as Roger said, and sort of make decisions that, like, be happy to sit with things a bit longer and make decisions that are with values like integrity, authenticity, you know, more at the forefront. And I think we don't need to be so focused on timelines and the crazy pace of getting things done and crazy volume, getting things done in bulk or en masse. I think it really is about a much more slow, using this time to slow down and actually just be more considered in our decision making generally.
And Sally?
I mean, we all used to have FOMO, you know, oh God, what am I missing out on? And now it's like, oh, do I really want to go out? Like, do I have to? And I guess that pleasure of having a little moment to consider what we're doing, as everyone's spoken about, rushing around. But I guess it's that thing about the quality of the work that we do and we try to do, and the quality of our relationships and how we are actually connected to people. So I guess we have to make a sincere effort to commit to our roles within the art, design, media landscape, and actually really, I love what a friend of mine says, I don't have one, but it's where you put your cock on the block and you actually, you know. I don't want one either, but I think it's a strong idea, you know.
Can you be on every panel that I'm ever on in future?
No, but really, it's like, let's put it on the block, you know. What are we going to do? You know, we've had all these dramas, we're flitting around, we're distracted. It's like, it's really beautiful to see everybody's work here and what they've actually achieved. You know, it's not talk, it's not, they've actually done it. You know, Pascale made that beautiful room. She didn't talk about it or bitch about somebody else's project. She's done it, you know, and I think it's that idea about actually doing what we can to realize these things and walking the talk and articulating the things that we believe in with objects.
So Sally, I'm dying to say this, but if you were to ask people to put their cocks on the block, so to speak,
sorry,
what would you ask them to do? How can people support creative industries?
Well, I mean, the best thing to do is to go out and buy art, because a lot of the time it makes a real difference to an artist's monthly wage if they've got some money. And it's the best thing to do. You know, they weren't able to work in pubs or clean or do their crappy jobs while COVID was on. And if you go out, you support the galleries and you support the artist, it's a really, and, you know, follow your heart and put your money down. And I think I had a lot of clients reaching out during COVID and saying, I love my picture. You know, it really means something to me at this time. And that's always a real pleasure. And art will give you pleasure. These objects, these things, they will give you pleasure if you invest in them.
One of the questions that we've had come through on the chat is, how do I start buying art, collecting art? What's the starting point?
I've got an idea for that, because we were debating this at home. Like, what are you going to say? I was, you know, before I got on I put my thing on the blog.
Did you actually prepare?
Well, I was made to prepare. I wasn't going to, but I insisted on. And I haven't used any of it. But one thing I know, it can be really intimidating when you say that, because there's a sort of there can be this awkward status anxiety about buying art and who it's from and all that sort of thing. Whereas we found that everything we've collected or got for ourselves, and it can be as modest or, I think the Meadmore thing's the most expensive thing we've got, but it has a story behind it, and it reminds us it's something we found when we've been away traveling or at home or down the road, but it has something you personally connect to. And it doesn't have to be expensive. It could be something that someone's created in a shop that you were the last place you were looking for, and then you see this thing and you go, actually, I mean, I've got an affectation for things that are drawings, and collected a whole lot from around the world, including relatives and so on. And it's what it means to you and what it reminds you of that I think is really important. And I think if someone's away on a trip and they see something, buy it, get it. Does it, and that is, it's almost better than a photo.
I mean, I think that Jeffrey Haddy is a applied arts dealer, and he always just says, get what you love.
Yeah.
Get what you love. Just get what you love. And I think that's a really good point of departure.
Yeah, definitely. And Lucy, do you have anything to add to sort of how to start an art collection or where to begin? I suppose the design files is probably a good place to...
I mean, we cover a broad spectrum of different art, some sort of decorative and some more, I guess, what would be considered fine art. But in a general sense, I think a great place to, I mean, what intimidates a lot of people is price point, and thinking that if they inquire about a price, it may not be out of their price range. A great place to start on that front is to look at artist-run spaces. And also many artist-run spaces have fundraiser exhibitions and auctions where art can, by really great, quite established and emerging artists, can often be priced a little lower than normal, or smaller works or works on paper by established artists are available, and that's a good place to sort of start and to dip your toe in the water. So spaces like West Space, Dane Singer has a great gallery, which is not an artist-run space, but showcases a lot more emerging artists. But really, it's just research, Google, just Google artist-run spaces Melbourne or artist-run spaces Sydney. Art fairs like the Melbourne Art Fair are a great resource in terms of what's on their websites, and whenever they do have their events, there's always spaces within those events for emerging artists and different scale sort of work. So just join the community, I think, is the place to start, and it will open up to you. Yeah.
Pascale, can I ask you what your first piece of art was, or piece of design that you purchased?
My first piece. think it could have actually been that Clement Needmore. I've got a maquette, and he's actually inspired me on many projects. He inspired the wine cabinet, which at Penfold Smithfield Estate, that holds the whole range of Grange wines. And he also inspired the Baroque Cumulus, which I did, this little piece that I have. Although I have actually, thinking about it, may not be the first one. It may have been a Tony Lloyd piece from Arc One, and then a Tasmanian artist who does photographic work. I've got a few of her pieces. Got her name. Pat Brassington.
Oh, Pat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's slightly surreal, slightly disturbing, but still beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I've just been told we've gone very, very over time today, so I might wrap things here. I'd just like to thank everybody for obviously attending today in our little digital world that we're now living in, and thank you very much to our panel for participating. It's always wonderful to speak to you all. And I hope everybody can check out the Melbourne Art Fair viewing rooms, which is taking place now until June the 7th. So if you haven't already, you can take some time, explore some of the beautiful artwork from some of Australia's and the region's best galleries. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Genevieve. Nice to meet you all.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.